Hey, we're on. What is happening, everybody? All right, so I figured I would bring you guys up to speed. Did a trip to the drag strip last night with Little Miss Revlon, and of course, she did not disappoint as per usual. But I wanted to bring you guys again up to speed as far as how the car did last night versus how it did at the track rental. I get a lot of questions about density altitude, how it affects the car's performance, things like that. But the big issue is that guys can possibly have is that it's not just the density altitude. There's other things like humidity, water grains, things like that. Dr. Devson, what's up, Doc? That will affect your DA that will affect your ET, but it affects it in different ways. And interestingly enough, it's fun to kind of get a back and forth with the time slips. James, what's up, man? Hope you're doing good. So anyway, before I dive into it, though, I thought it was kind of interesting, just the way that the car did react from last week to this week based on track prep. And so to give you an idea, for the track rental, we had great track prep. It was a dedicated track prep for us all day, and everybody was running on drag radials or slicks. Last night, and by the way, this is a nod, tip of the cap to Houston Raceway Park. Last night, obviously we had a ton of street cars there because it was a normal street night. And because of that, we had a ton of street cars that have a nasty habit of tearing the track up. But they stayed on top of track prep, and my car did not spin one time, dead hooked every single time. Can't say enough good about that. So again, big props to Houston Raceway Park. They did a fantastic job keeping up with track prep. And as far as I'm concerned, my car didn't spin all night, so I had a blast. I had a freaking awesome time. But getting back into it, so talking about density altitude, DA, as it's, the colloquialism, the thing is that guys will chase DA all year just to make one halo pass. So what's density altitude? Density altitude is basically a correction factor that will give you the amount of available oxygen in the air. Originally, nobody really cared about density altitude unless you were a pilot and making with your engine based on your altitude. And basically, without getting too technical, for every 1,000 feet, you lose 3% of your horsepower. So if you are at 3,000 feet with an engine that is rated at 100 feet at sea level, do the math, you're at 91 horsepower, or almost 10% of your power being gone at an elevation of 3,000 feet. Density altitude is a way to correct sea level for the density of oxygen. So in other words, if you are in Houston, Texas, in the middle of January, chances are you're going to have a lot of available oxygen because you're closer to sea level. Whereas if you're in everybody uses Denver, Colorado, or wherever, where the elevation is very high, you won't have as much available oxygen because you're at a higher altitude. Your DA is going to be higher because your base altitude is higher. But Houston, during the middle of, August, is going to have less available oxygen, but we're still at sea level. So how do you determine the available amount of oxygen? That's where density altitude comes into play. It's a bunch of mathematical magic. But anyway, long story short, a 3,000 foot DA just means that your available oxygen is equivalent to you being at 3,000 feet based on a bunch of certain parameters that mean things to people that pay attention to this. So guys will wait all year long. The temperature, everybody goes, oh, well, when it's cold outside, the cars run better. Yeah, well, that's the reason why. Anyway, among other things. So that boring explanation out of the way. The density altitude last night was around negative 300 to 0, more or less. Most of the time, guys, if you're hovering between 300 feet one way or another, above 0, you're basically more or less at a 0 DA. The day it'll move around that number basically of 0 density altitude. And the car did really well. The car ran a string of 1030s. Here's a 1032 at just under 132, 1032 at 134. Actually, that was the last pass of the night where DA had finally dropped. a 1028. So it did go a 1020 at 132.32 and a 1031 at 132 miles an hour. So how does that compare? Well, during the track rental, we had a density altitude of about minus 1,000 because the temperature was significantly lower. The problem was the air grains and the humidity was off the charts. We're literally running in a fog. That water displaces the available oxygen. And so, yeah, you've got a lower DA, but it's not the extra moisture in there. It's not doing any good. Long story short, almost as good, but dropped about a tenth. And that's about right because, you know, we lost about 1,000 feet of density altitude. You're going to get a drop of about a tenth. And it played out with my car last night. Had the air been a little bit better, though, on that track rental, from what I can see, this car behind me would have gone a 10-10 or at least a 10-20 something. And that's really more to the point. You know, chasing numbers is always tough, and especially this time of year where, you know, your opportunities can be few and far between with the rain that we've been having lately. That's been wrecking shop too. So anyway, I figured I would open it up to you guys if you had any questions about this, because I get so many questions on density altitude, water grains, humidity. How does that all play into effect? Well, last night, that it was not that humid by, at least by the standards of the track rental, but it was still pretty humid. It was about 70% humidity. So much so that the cars had dew all over them, which really normally at that point, man, it's time to just cut it and let it take it to the house because the track's going to go away. But Houston Raceway Park stayed on top of it and did a really good job keeping up with it. But let me catch up with you guys. Cuda Man checking in. Best mods for a 6.1. Extrude Honda intake, ported heads, custom grind cam 6.4, long tubes, and catback would be my, and a tune, obviously. White Knuckle RT, what up, B? Got the thumbs up, got the pounds out. Grab a gear saying great topic. Thank you very much. Got the thumbs up. Chase Cars looking at getting a used GT350, but worried about the engine issues I've been hearing about. Is it worth the risk, or would you rather just get a C7 Stingray? I wouldn't buy a C7 Stingray. I would get a C7 Grand Sport if I were to get any of them. And a GT350, I don't know if it's still under warranty. I say go for it. The car's an amazing car. It's one of my favorite cars that I've ever driven. I wouldn't have a problem with a used GT350. But make sure it's still under warranty. And I think the engine issue, by the way, on those cars is, again, it's kind of few and far between. You know, the vocal minority on that, which you could probably imagine would be pretty loud, is going to take over the conversation and dominate it. So, but yeah, I wouldn't worry about that one at all. And as far as the C7 Stingray, I'm not on board with it. It's an aesthetic thing. It has nothing to do with the car itself. It's just the Grand Sport looks so much better, and I don't know how much more a Grand Sport is, but for me, I just go Grand Sport every time. Let's see. Doc Div saying, tonight was the first night to get the Ram out since the rental. Forgot how nice it was just to cruise. DA good subject tonight. Thank you, sir. Levi Evans saying, just bought my 2010 Challenger SRT8 as a 6.1 with a 6.1. Wanting to know what's the best thing I can do to the auto transmission to hold power when I start modding. Don't worry about doing anything with that transmission yet. There's nothing that you need to do. That NAG one will hold actually quite a bit of power. It depends on what do you mean by modding and how much power you go boost or nitrous or something like that. I mean, you're going to have to start looking at doing something else with that transmission. But if you're just going to go with like a cam or something like that, don't worry about it. NAG one will hold plenty of power. SRT Mark saying, found out it wasn't my lifters. I spun a bearing. Ooh. But I'm getting a new block with an MMX cam, full bolt on. What's your take on E85 for NA64? E85 for NA64 is good. Just don't look for a horsepower number. Look for a torque number. You can, and I've done this before too. In fact, recently with my buddy Rob's cars, and true FBO stock cam on E85. And the thing is, the car, they don't respond to timing the way that you would think. I mean, I've been trying to sneak timing here and there in the tune, mainly to help the car get out of its own way more than anything else. But up top, you're not, the intake manifold is not your best friend with E85 with that car. You're displacing too much oxygen for fuel at that point. And down low, that's fine because your fuel requirements are not that high. You can, I mean, it's just easier to make the power down low, making torque with an NA version of any of these cars, really any car for that matter that's NA on E85. Don't look for power up top, look more for the torque production down low and in the mid-range. That's really where the E85 is going to shine. Unless the intake is something like the Mustangs where it just flows unbelievable numbers anyway. Levi's asking also, how reliable is a 6.1? Incredibly reliable if it's well maintained. Let's see. Oh, Cam Oley's saying he likes the 85 for 6.4. He ran it in his before he got his Hellcat. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I not more than about 3 weeks ago, I was hammering out some tuning on one. And, you know, like I say, I mean, it's for torque, yeah, especially if you've got a car that can, you know, work with it, long tubes, the whole bit. You can really kind of spool it up a little bit with the cam. The intake becomes a little bit more efficient with the overlap. But, again, I wouldn't lean on it too hard. Dr. New saying, oh, God, the rain. Yeah, here it comes again, man. Speed Freak 93, AB. So in the summer weather, when DA's in the 2,500 range, how much horsepower is lost on average once you're in that high positive range? It's 3% per 1,000 foot. It's been tried, true. It's an aviation standard, so it doesn't get any better than that. And that is for naturally aspirated engines. For boosted engines, it's a little bit less, but not by much. Positive displacement is going to be about the same as a naturally aspirated engine. Centrifugal supercharged, a little bit less than that. Basically, you're just kind of you're hanging that on an efficiency table more than anything else up top. But down low, it's going to get hurt just like a naturally aspirated engine. So up top on a centrifugal supercharger, just based on the efficiency, instead of 3%, you might be down, you know, 2.5 or 2.7%. It's still pretty close to that. Turbos, on the other hand, because of waste gates and things like that, that turbo will keep spooling and it will make boost unless one of two things happens. Either it literally runs out of oxygen, runs out of air, and at that point, available boost will drop, manifold pressure will drop. Or the wastegate opens. Typically, turbo cars are unaffected and actually do incredibly well at altitude. So something to think about if you're building a hot rod and you're at altitude. Turbo is the only way to go, which is why they run them in airplanes. Let's see. Catalyst 99, will forged internals increase performance? If left to stock specifications, no, they won't. They will only add strength. Now, strength in this case may only mean that they can technically handle more power, given the fact that the boost is, or that the tune is on point with the amount of boost or nitrous that you're running. Now, forged internals can help you make more power if you're going with a lighter weight set. So lighter weight pistons, lighter weight rods can help the thing spool up a little bit easier, and it has less inertial drag on the engine. So in that case, yes, you can, but not necessarily something that you want to spend money on for a street car. It's not really, you would never notice the difference on a street car. All out race stuff, probably. James asking, do you think your car can run 1019 and under on its current state? Yes. However, I'm going to have to cheat with Mother Nature helping me along with that. It's going to take density altitude. That's basically where I'm at right now. And it's going to take density altitude, air quality, meaning low humidity, low water grains type of a situation. Water grains, it's kind of another way of looking at humidity, by the way. And it's going to take extremely dry air and a low temperature. It doesn't have to be freezing or anything, but it's going to need to be, 40 degrees and, 30% humidity type of a day. Without that, the car's just not going to be able to do it. But with those conditions, yes, as a matter of fact, I know for a fact that if I had the opportunity to run in the air that Legion of Demons had to run in, the car would have absolutely gone a 10-teen. I am positive of that. By the way, I am running the car with the passenger seat in the car. Passenger seat mafia over here. Anyway, figured I'd throw that in as a rub. S. Dot saying, Cooks or Corsa? Cooks all the time. All day, every day Cooks, mainly because of fitment. Never run into a problem with Cooks. Not in recent history, anyway. Lone with Custom saying, hi, B. Hey, man. Dr. Dip is saying, I always thought about the moisture hurting the DA even when it's higher, but gotta love those Texas winter days most each time. Although the air sucks in 100-degree weather. Yeah, it does. Grabbing Gear asking, who makes the best 426 stroker kit for the 392? I would probably say Arrington, to be honest with you guys. I wouldn't really bother with anything else. I'd do a block swap and call it good. Mulder pistons, rods, Eagle pistons, JE rods, whichever way you go, they're all really good. There's not really a best, but if I had to do one, I would go Arrington and just leave it at that. Go high compression, whichever direction you feel like going. But yeah, I'd go Arrington. Let's see. Dr. Diz saying, couldn't us boosted guys make up for it with boost? Although, wouldn't it be harder on internals? It's not harder on internals with the DA, especially if you're turbo. Turbo, it doesn't care. I mean, it might be a little bit laggy at altitude or with crappier DA, but you're going to make boost. I mean, that turbo is going to grab air until, one of two things happens. Wastegate opens or bypass opens. Or you simply are so high up in altitude that you can't draw in any more air. And at that point, you just have a lower boost level. For positive displacement superchargers, technically speaking, yes, really anything that's a belt-driven supercharger. But at that point, you have a higher inertial load, which can be harder on the car. So altitude in that respect could hurt the car, but we're talking infinitesimal amounts of more higher wear or whatever. It wouldn't be any different than just pulling the car up. So, and those are typically not all that conducive to any kind of engine damage. So no, you'll be in good shape. Buck saying, dude, you got a demon now. Nice. No, it is not a demon. In fact, it's literally the farthest thing from a demon as far as Hellcats go. That is an early release Hellcat 2015. This mosquito is going to die. I'm going to send it right back to hell where it came from. Sucker's going to land, and that's going to be all she wrote. Dr. Div saying best thing he ever did was forge the bottom end. It can definitely give you some confidence, that's for sure. HU37 saying, I have a centrifugal supercharger in my car. I find it is a little less affected in bad DA. When the DA is good, my car is better affected compared to the NA car with similar horsepower. Yeah, and again, that's going to have more to do with the fact that you are able to cram air into that intake manifold with that blower. So for me, it's kind of interesting when the questions do come up about DA, because people get a little bit confused. Now, realistically, all you need to know is if it's cooler outside, the car is going to run better. If the air is wet, the car is not going to run as good. And that is the most simplistic way to put it, but that's kind of how it falls into play. But to know the difference and to know the reasons why, and if you're really holding on to your time slips, it's to know why your car performed a certain way. Got that motherfucker. Go to hell, stay there. Is to know that why your car performed the way that it did. Some guys say, it was cold outside, so it should have run the same kind of number. Well, not if it was cold, but more humid. And all these other factors start to come into play. So again, that's why we're talking about it tonight, because it can be a bit of a confusing subject if you're not used to talking about DA, if you're not used to tracking it. But here's kind of the fun thing. Once you get into tracking DA and you get used to knowing what the DA is when you go to the drag strip, you'll be able, you just get used to it. And so on a day where it's going to be, 70 degrees and 70% humidity, that's going to be a DA of about 850 down here and in Southeast Texas. If it's 85 degrees and it's 80% humidity, that's going to be about a 2,000 or an 1,800 foot day. And that's just how you translate the day. You translate the data, and you know that, okay, well, I'm probably going to be down about a tenth or two. And in fact, it kind of plays out. This car in 3,000 foot DA was running 1050s. So if you kind of take that along its normal progression, take about a tenth out for every 1,000 feet. That brings it down to basically 1020s and more or less zero DA. And it went a 1020 at last night. So again, my car is following the DA curve. I mean, almost perfectly. Bracket racers know about DA more than anybody. By the way, if you ever see one of those big bracket race rigs roll up and you see this thing that looks like they got a weather station going on, you're about ready to have somebody bust out of there with a microphone and a suit on, they are following DA, and they can program their car based on atmospheric conditions to run a very specific number. And I would never want to get into that, because that to me is like, it's the most boring kind of racing that there is. But from just a nuts and bolts science side of it, it's pretty cool to watch those guys. Callus is asking, do you like the idea of the Helion kit on a 5.7, or is it too much trouble and not worth the hassle? Too much trouble and not worth the hassle are subjective questions. If there's a will, there's a way. And honestly, I think it's going to be the way that most people are going to start moving towards, as opposed to centrifugal superchargers, probably more turbo kits than anything else once that thing starts to hit. Just my personal opinion. Lone Wolf Customs, what camshaft do you think would be best for a carbureted 5.7 Hemi for a swap? Give Dr. Diff a shout. He's got a camshaft called a Contender that would be very good for that. But the good thing is, if you're doing a carb swap, you're going to be locking out the cam. You're basically turning the thing into, a normal engine at that point, without variable intake runners or camshafts or anything like that. I would probably err a little bit on that, tighten up the LSA, just because carburetors aren't as affected by tighter LSAs, and build something that's, have a cam that's a little bit fun. An LSA somewhere around 112 and a half, intake duration of, I don't know, pick one. It doesn't really matter if you're going carbureted, but depending on what your application is, no more than about on a 5.7, I'd say no more than about 218, and exhaust duration is going to fall in line with 228 or something like that. Dr. Dips asking, what DA app do you use? It is called Dr. Dial-In is the one that I use. I've thought about buying one of those DA weather stations, but damn, they want yeah, no, they're expensive as hell, man. No, just get Dr. Differential. You can plug in all the information, and it works really well. HU37 is saying, once you know your car and understand something about DA, it takes some of the suspense out when you go to the drag strip. You have a good idea for what the car is going to run before you get there. Absolutely. I mean, at that point, really the biggest suspense that you have is the track going to be prepped properly. That's the main thing. And at least that's what I've noticed. The hardest part for me has been really track prep, tire setup, fuel, all of that kind of stuff, fuel quality, how much knock retard am I getting, things like that. And it's funny, when you get into the Hellcats or really any of these modern cars, higher compression cars, blower stuff, forced induction, you learn to monitor short-term knock retard as closely as as you could possibly imagine. Like it's a newborn baby part of data. You just you waited, every time it even ticks over, you hold your breath. That is the go-to number one data PID that guys will look at. And it's interesting too, because you can see fuel quality just in the short-term knock retardant. Cars like the Dodges too, by the way, they hang on that knock sensor, so you get a little bit of false knock. But I've got mine tuned out enough to where I think I've tuned out false knock, and if there is any false knock, it's a decent. It'd have to be a pretty good amount of false knock to really piss off my knock sensors at this point. But I'll see it pull timing a little bit every once in a while when I'm running straight 93, and I mean, all of them do. Hell, it's not uncommon for Hellcats especially to pull, 3 degrees, 4 degrees. It's absolutely not uncommon. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Dr. Div saying 2 down. Dr. Div saying 5.7 turbo is where it's at. Use my enforcer and let her eat. Let the RPM run up in the first 2 gears and make the rest at 6,100 RPM. Let's see. HU37 saying, I look at weather forecast and I can pretty much tell you ET in mile an hour. There is suspense because of something, if something went wrong. Yeah. Yeah, that'll always set you sideways, won't it? And Dr. Div's talking about Helium making a good kit. So, anyway, the big thing that I wanted to, try to find out is if you guys did have, questions on density altitude or how it would affect your car, post them up, man. I mean, I want to be able to at least try to bring you into the fold as far as knowledge goes on DA. Because like I say, I'm getting a lot of questions about DA. What does it mean? Why is it let's see if we can go for 3. Now we got 3. Down, mosquitoes. 0, me, 3. Anyway, why? How does it affect the car? What does it mean? What, when I'm looking at density altitude, how much power can I expect to lose? Those are the types of questions I want to try to answer for you guys. And again, it's funny. A lot of times guys will ask about dyno numbers. How does DA affect dyno numbers? And it's a really interesting question because there is, in the dyno, you'll always see SAE corrected numbers. The SAE correction on a dyno, or you can see STD correction or whatever the case is. But that correction factor is, again, correcting for density altitude. It's got a barometric pressure part of that's involved. And again, it's looking for a constant of barometric pressure and temperature. Excuse me. And that's what it's looking for to make those corrections. So how does the DA affect it? Well, if you're running your car on a dyno and the temperature is really high and the DA sucks, then obviously the car will make less actual power. The DA correction, or at least the dyno correction, to correct for barometric pressure and temperature, will correct that number plus a certain amount of percentage to equal that corrected number. But what it will not do is factor in things like catalytic converter overtemp if you got into early cat overtemp. But number 2, it won't be able to account for any hot spark table that you may run into while you're running the car on the dyno. If it's hot, there are some spark modifiers that will start to reel in timing a little bit. And because of that, you, instead of running, say, 20 degrees of timing, you're only running 17.5 because it's hot. And so running your car on the dyno in those conditions can be kind of bad. It'll be artificially low. So again, kind of akin to a DA conversation. Well, what about when it's cold outside? Well, the same applies, except in this case, it goes the other direction. So there is a cold spark table in your tune. And instead of running 20 degrees, let's say you're able to run 21.5 or 22 degrees. In that case, the dyno doesn't know how much timing that you're running. Your actual number will be higher and it will lower that number, but that number may still be higher from a corrected standpoint. That's why guys, when they take their cars to the dyno, I always try to tell them, look, if you're going to dyno your car and you're just doing it to get a number, if you want to cheat the number, do it during the wintertime when you're going to have all your spark tables in full set to kill mode, even from the factory. If you're doing it trying to get some consistent data or just to get shift points, things like that out of the car, take it on a spring or a fall day, some day where it's around 65, 70 degrees outside, not too hot, not too cold, basically right in the middle. That'll give you your best chance to get at least some of the best reliable data on your car. But that's kind of how you can cheat a dyno number too. Kind of a heads up. Dr. Diff saying my knock sensors get pissed off when the gate opens, so to hell with them. Right? Symphonic saying just affect dyno numbers. That's awesome. Didn't even see that. Started talking about it. There you go, brother. Symphonics, the second I typed it, you spoke it. That's pretty good. F. Joe saying, B. Mason, happy Saturday. Brother, hope all is well. Hope all is well with you too, man. Opinions on what horsepower level M6 owners should start considering a QuickTime style spun steel bell housing for safety? The technical answer to that is anytime you're taking the car to a drag strip, it needs to have some type of an armored bell housing, or at least a blanket to go over the top of it. That being said, realistically with these cars, I don't think you're going to hit a power level where you're going to be worried about the clutch scattering on you. Running a bell housing blanket is never a bad idea, though. So look into that initially. Don't really worry too much about going with an SFI bell housing until, I'll put it like this: if you hit it with nitrous, throw a bell housing on it. A blower, maybe then too. But something like a cam, something like that, I don't see you hurting it too much, and it's probably not anything that a blanket wouldn't take care of. But anything above and beyond stock is definitely something to consider. Etro's saying, do you have a PayPal for donations for the Diet Coke Fund? No, it's done through YouTube. It's the Super Chat, I think, is what it is. So, but yeah, that actually technically does go to my PayPal. It's all done through YouTube, but thank you for the consideration, my friend. Dr. Div saying, I did that, dynoed the Ram on nitrous the only day it snowed. It just happened like that. Made 547 to the wheels on a Mustang on a 100 shot. That's awesome. Catalyst is hollering at Dr. Diff. Speed Shot 57 with a Helion turbo kit will be faster than the Scat Pack. Let's see. Dr. Diff's going to have to answer that. Dr. Diff saying, ask Pops about clutches. He had a shirt that says Clutch Killer. That's funny. But yeah, no, I just, just some tips for you guys too. When you're taking your car to the drag strip, in higher DAs, this is something to consider also. The higher the DA means there's less available oxygen, but by association of that, there's just less available air in general. So when you're talking about less air, that also means less cooling efficiency. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you're going to be running your car hard, make sure you budget a little bit more time for cool down in higher DA conditions. Again, less available air in general means less available air to cool your contraption as well. Symphonics is asking, any word on the street when any of your friends are going to be getting a hold of their C8s? So far, they're still on order, so I don't know yet. Probably by sometime in March is what I've been hearing. So we'll see. Hopefully I get a chance to play with one. But yeah, looking at sometime possibly around March. Catalyst 99 saying, I thought mosquitoes die off during the winter. This is Texas. And mosquitoes, well, they never die. Especially when your winters aren't really winters. We're not really having a winter this year. And people like to joke about Texas winters only being 2 weeks long and stuff like that. Look, we're doing good to get a day or two where the temperature dips below 65. So Yeah, and the mosquitoes, they're alive and well, unfortunately. Grab a gear saying, I apologize for not knowing. Is your Hellcat stock other than tires, wheels, and gearing? Yes. It's got a transmission tune, a rear seat delete, and a diff brace. But that's it. It's got the Mopar, I believe it's called the shutdown package. It's actually the red eye rear seat delete. The 309 gear doesn't have any catch cans or anything like that up front. As you can see, stock airbox, stock air filter, which you can't see, but it's a stock air filter. Stock catalytic converters. It's got stock exhaust. Even still has the resonators on it. What else is on it? I mean, it's all stock stuff. Still has the stock big old heavy 6-piston Brembos, all of that stuff. So yeah, it's basically it's stock boost. Is there anything else done in this thing? Nothing else is done to it, which is kind of the cool part of it. Oh, TBD, or I'm sorry, TBA idler pulleys, mainly because for bling reasons. The stock ones just look like ass. They're big steel. I don't have them over here, but they're just big steel pieces that look like shit. So anyway, put some better looking idlers on it. A little bit lighter weight, but I don't know that it really made a difference there. But again, all stock stuff, and running 1030s, 1020s in good air. Basically, here's the thing. That reminds me. So the correction factor. Let's get back to that real quick. So back in the day, you used to see SAE corrected 0 to 60, SAE corrected quarter mile times, things like that. What that is it's a DA correction. So let's get back into that discussion, because I want to make sure if you guys have questions that I'm answering these questions. And you know how easy it is for me to get off topic. So let's talk about that for a minute. So there are calculators out there. Wallace Racing. Make sure you make a donation. The guy is that is one of the best websites for engine calculators, quarter mile calculators, camshaft calculators, goofy stuff like that. All kinds of engine math, though, is on Wallace Racing's website. Give the guy a donation. Hit him up with a couple of bucks, man. The guy, it's invaluable what the service that guy does. Anyway, enough about me kissing his ass. The thing is that when you correct that quarter mile, you're correcting to a DA. And in other words, that's what back in the day when you would get magazines and you would see the breakdown of all the cars in the back. I think Motor Trend or something like that used to do this, where they had all the tests that they had run were in the back of the magazine. You would see, like a 99 Corvette when a 13.0 at 105 miles an hour corrected, or you would see an uncorrected number. When you get into the DA correction, that's where guys get nuts. So if you made your pass and it was 3,000 foot DA, how would that 3,000 foot DA pass be able to translate to somebody that lives at sea level? And it's what a lot of my friends and I do. I've got friends all over the place. And, when I say, yeah, my car ran a 1030, I always make sure that I tell them at what density altitude. That way they can take their times, correct it down to a 10, like a negative DA, and tell me how slow my car is compared to theirs if you did the conversion. But anyway, that's important though, because it helps to level the playing field, and you get a barometer of how your car really does match up against other cars. Because let's face it, it's tough to compare a car that runs, say, in Colorado to Texas. It's practically impossible. The air density is nowhere near the same, and that creates its own host of problems. But with this correction factor in play, you can get an idea in terms of performance relative to the conditions that you live in. So that's the big portion of it too. So again, these are areas where DA, the general description of DA has a lot of different meanings. Again, corrected quarter mile times, corrected horsepower times, knowing what your car is going to run based on the conditions outside. That is literally the density altitude. So having all of that knowledge on board can help you be better understood when it, or have, you can have a better understanding rather, when people are talking about, well, my car ran this number at whatever density altitude. You can be like, damn, that's pretty good, or damn, that's lying. Like, in other words, you can't say your car is a mid 9-second car if it ran a 965 at 140 miles an hour in negative 3,000 foot DA. In that type of a condition, your car would have a 9% horsepower advantage over a sea level car. If your car happened to be making rated at 840 horsepower, SAE at 0 feet altitude, which all engines are, by the way, that can be a significant bump in power that you had because of the density altitude. So just things to consider when you hear these numbers. When you have that information on board, it allows you to be able to either call, hey man, that's a really good time, or hey, that's actually kind of a bullshit. What does it run in normal conditions? And that's the ability to have that conversation stems from an understanding of density altitude. Let's see. Toxic Hellcat saying, do you recommend an oil breather cap for a Hellcat? Is it worth spending $75? Well, you can't see it, but I don't have one on my car. And at Stock Boost, probably not. May change. And I might put a breather on it too. I just don't know that it's really worth it, if for no other reason than just keep screwing around with the car. But again, right now it's doing so well, I don't see any real reason to do it. If you've put pulleys on your car though, yeah, I'd say you probably want to start looking into that though. Just to be on the safe side, evacuate that crankcase as best as you can. Doctor's saying, they're saying, F those cats, they can leave. Not on a Stock Boost car. In fact, every time we've done testing with the positive displacement stuff, taking the cats off does not do anybody any good. I say that. It doesn't hurt the car to have the cats on it, but you definitely need to tune it for not having cats to get a little bit more cylinder pressure back in it, which means up on the timing just a little bit. Let's see. Dr. Div saying you need long tubes for better miles per gallon. That is true. Hector saying, good morning, Vietnam. I like it. That's all I have to say. Dr. Div saying, and let it breathe. Ashley Mills is in saying, tell Chris I went 10:47 today at Evendale. Ooh, we need to get you two back out on the track then. That'd be a damn good race. And I will let him know for sure. Hector's got the smiles up. Rip saying, hey, y'all, what's up, man? What's up, Rip? Callis is saying, why did NASCAR run all factory stock cars? These cars sort of all look the same. I'd love to see Challengers in the race. Man, don't even get me started on that. That is I'm right there with you. My grandfather actually raced NASCAR before it was NASCAR. It was just stock cars. And yeah, I can't answer that question, man. They're not really cars anymore. They're just glorified go-karts, man. They're not they're just, God, don't even get me rolling with that. Rip saying, I just got off work now, so I might fall asleep watching. I'm right there with you, man. I might fall asleep doing the show. Doug just saying, but those Colorado guys are always talking about good air out here, but our air sucks with the humidity. Yeah, it does. But at least we've got it to talk about. Those poor guys are like, their KPA is like, 875. 0.875 when ours is, 1.00. The Biz is asking, oil catch cans, are they needed for the 392 engines? Yeah. For the NA stuff, I do recommend them. And I ran one on my truck and one on my 392. So, yeah, I'd say that they are. And now, like I say, they're not going to hurt anything for sure. And it keeps the oil from getting into the plenum of the intake manifold. You'd be surprised too. Whenever I port manifolds, I always try to ask the guys, look, just have the thing, sitting on an old rag or something in your garage for about a week before I get it. Have it sitting vertical. Try to get as much oil out of there as possible, because I get my hands on some of these intakes and it is nasty as shit. So yeah, in that respect, I'd say yes, they're worth it. Doug is asking, can I get 500 horsepower out of my 5.7 Hemi? Absolutely, you can. Boost that sucker. You'll get it. Rift is saying, when I changed the intake out of my Hellcat, I noticed the so-called dry side had a good amount of oil in the tube. Do you think I should get a dry side catch can? Yes. If you are going to do catch cans on your Hellcat, you need one on both sides. You need one on the wet side and on the dry side. What does that mean? Well, without getting too technical, you need one on the left and one on the right. Don't just get one. It's not going to do you any good. Let's see. Smoking 05 saying, I'm joining late. Talking DA. The other day in Fairbanks, it was minus 40 degrees and minus 7,000 foot DA. Well, see, the problem with that is that minus 40 degrees wreaks havoc on tires. So, yeah, DA would be pretty kick-ass, actually. Dr. Div saying, I need a new catch can badly. After 12 PSI, it's blowing out. That could be a problem. HU37 saying, part of the problem of using corrected DAs for quarter mile, 18 mile per hour is the car makers can use it to fudge the numbers. When you read articles, actual performance fails to match what the car company says. That actually happens more. The example that I gave was the Demon, by the way. That car should never have been rated at a 965. You have to take the 3,000 foot DA thing out of it. You really would be saying that car is more like a 970, 980 car. And that's just, the way that you would rate that car. And that would be a little bit on the generous side. I'd have probably undersold that and said, yeah, it's a 990 car, and just let it ride from there. It's a whole lot cooler to overperform than it is to underperform when it comes to that kind of stuff. Ashton Mills saying, yes, sir. Oh, Sean's in. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The tent fund is being well funded. Best oil catch cans for the Hellcat. Man, let's see. Who would I go with? Billet Technologies probably would be the way that I would go for my car. So I'd say Billet Technologies for the Hellcat. But thank you very much for the tent fund update. Let's see. Smoking 05 is asking, would a stock Hellcat be able to compensate for negative 7,000 foot DA? In the tune, yes, it can compensate for negative 7,000 foot DA. It would go into more or less not really a default mode, but it would be at the very bottom of the tune on spark timing, and it would max out the injectors at that point. I can guarantee you that. We'd be running much timing, I'll tell you that for sure. Ashton's hollering out at Dr. Diff. Thanks again, Sean. I appreciate it. Jazz is asking, what do you think about a dry shot on a stock red eye? Can the car add the needed fuel? I wouldn't run a dry shot on it at all without tuning for it specifically. And I wouldn't worry so much about the fuel at that point. I'd be more worried about the timing. Although the red eye is soft on timing. Now that you mention it, I would still run a wet shot, but yeah, you could probably get away with about a 75. And I'll leave it at that. Let's see. But I would never, here's the thing. I don't like feeding fuel through a centrifugal supercharger, number one. And number two, I don't like the idea of running a dry shot on a car that's already kind of riding the knock sensors pretty hard as it sits. it would probably be fine, but I would most certainly keep an eye on air fuel. Because I don't know of anybody that's run a dry shot on one of those cars. Callus 99, is that Leah Pritchett chick an official Mopar driver? Yes, she is. Or is she just some randomly selected to try the drag pack? No, she is a Top Fuel dragster pilot. Sean is asking, my car versus stock Demon on a drag pack 93 octane tune. The winner would be your car. Demons and Red Eyes both run 10 teens and 10 20s in their 93 octane tune. In that 93 octane mode, so to speak. Kimmy Davis saying, I had to pull you up on my red eye to 3.17 to make up for 2,000 feet of DA. I'm in Florida. DA sucks. Stock tune goes nines. I haven't seen a stock tune go nines just yet, unless you are trying to get away with it on the 317. In fact, we had one at Legion of Demons that set the red eye on a drag pack record, if that's even a thing, at a 10.17 or a 10.18, something like that. So if I'm missing something, let me know. But so far as I can tell, that's what I was being told there. And, all of the stock tune cars that aren't pressing the button at Legion and Demon, you can see it straight away because it'd be 1020 or a 1010 flashing on that screen. Dr. Div saying left and right catch can. Yep. You've got to do it. Yeah, Billet and JLT both make good catch cans. I'll agree with that. Dr. Diff's hanging out in with Ashley. Let's see. Blackbird. What up, B? What up, Blackbird? Shawnee, Demons should have been rated at 985 in a fair world. Yeah, I mean, in a realistic world, it should have been. And to be honest with you, I'd say 995 is probably a better number, just to keep it fair across the, across a little bit broader brush stroke of elevations. Because, I mean, there's a lot of guys that have those cars that are struggling to even get into the 10 teens if they're at altitude. So, yeah, I mean, again, those guys understand density altitude and they get it. But, yeah, density altitude for that car should have dictated that it was rated at the very fastest 985. I would have said 995. Let's see. See, Dr. Diff hanging out with Ashley saying, Marks does the best machine work in town. Hands down, rather? Absolutely. I hear a lot of good things. Riff is saying, is a vented catch can needed, or just having two catch cans is good enough without one being vented? You can just use the two. That's it. Don't worry about a vented catch can. Let's see. Queez is asking, would you recommend a Hellcat intake over the Mopar C8i found in the shakers and TAs? No, those are fine. I don't really like the TA intake. There's how do I explain this? It's almost like if you took a pipe and adjusted it like this, like it's got a real weird S to it in the TA. The shaker is pretty cool. It's, again, there's no ram air effect with any of these things. It's just funneling fresh air and keeping a cooler charge available at the filter. So, yeah, I mean, I like those systems. The TA is okay, but I think the TA with like a JLT cold air intake is probably a little bit better system, just to help get rid of that weird kink thing. I thought about see, what bummed me out about that is that I wanted to put one of the TA intakes on my SRT because I already had the hood, but after looking at it, no, not going to happen. Toxic Hellcat saying, what do you think about the advanced fuel dynamics E85 kit that doesn't require any tuning for Hellcats? They claim 60 plus real horsepower gains from just E85 and no tuning. I wouldn't go anywhere near that thing. Look, there's a lot of folks claiming that they've got something figured out for E85. Livernois was touting that their flex fuel tunes were the next best thing to slice bread, and I've got firsthand experience with one of those that was failing like you would not believe. It's just not there yet. Not that I'm aware of it, at least not through HP tuners. And they're trying to get this thing figured out. They've got uh, OS updates, those are operating system updates where you're importing certain aspects of a flex fuel tune into your existing computer, getting all of that stuff to work together. The problem is, and this is a big problem, by the way, is how those systems work. And I know we're here, it's a DA chat, but this is something good for you to know if you're talking about flex fuel in this respect, at least with the Mopar computers. They ride the knock sensors. So again, it's if the knock sensor starts to pick up knock, then it knows that it doesn't have the 85 in it. It's got 93 octane, and so it'll shift the timing table to a lower timing table because it assumes it has 93 octane. Well, what happens when you start to tune a Mopar? Well, you start messing with the knock sensor sensitivity. And if you numb them, then it will think that it always has, because there's no knock retard, it will consistently think that it's got some form of alcohol in that thing. So it's going to run higher timing values. And that's basically how the 100 octane button works on the Demon, by the way. So without getting overly technical here. So anyway, that's one of the sticking points is you try to tune the car, you end up getting a bunch of false knock if you don't mess with the knock sensor sensitivity. But if you do mess with it, then you can potentially hurt the engine because it'll think that it's got E85 and it doesn't. So I've heard of folks trying to bring in some technology to work with a GM sensor, and the GM sensor becomes like a 5-volt source for a secondary unit for the computer, like a piggyback. Anyway, it starts to get really convoluted at that point. So until they get a true E85 sensor like GM has and can make that work, I just stick with 2 different tunes for E85 and unleaded gasoline and go from there. Ashley say we may or may not have clutches slipping in my differential. Any suggestions? Well, sounds like it's time for a rebuild. Check the torque specs from one side to the other and find out at what point the breakaway torque is. If you're holding both axles straight or both axles solid, what is the breakaway torque if you're holding one side for the clutches and turning the other side? I think there's like this is going back some years, but I want to say it's like 175 or 225 pounds of breakaway torque variance that it has to meet as a minimum. Dr. Diff can probably answer this. If it doesn't meet that requirement, then the clutches are worn out. And I think some of them maybe as low as 130 foot-pounds. So it depends completely on the rear end and who set it up, what clutches, and all that kind of stuff. But there are some general rules, and I know Dr. Diff can score you away on that. Cattles is asking, was the 6.2 Max Wedge the first Mopar muscle engine? Not at all. In 1958, in fact, if you ever watched the movie Christine, you will see this engine. It is one of their first hot rod engines, which is a 350 cubic inch wedge motor with dual 4 barrels. You could also get that same engine with the very earliest electronic fuel injection. A lot of people don't know that, but Mopar was the first to develop and deploy that in mass. Well, try to anyway, but unfortunately there were some issues with some transistors and some other stuff. But anyway, that was a 350 cubic inch wedge motor with dual quads. And then before that, you had the DeSotos, and they were all Hemis. So you had like a 200 and something cubic inch, you had a 345 cubic inch, a 392 cubic inch Hemi. These were all the firepower engines. And all of them made famous in drag racing back then, mainly because of the head flow, and they worked great with supercharging. So the 392 became real famous in drag racing circles. So that's where all that came from. Let's see. Blackbird saying, which do you prefer, more timing on a Hellcat or adding boost? Well, can you do both? Can I choose both? Now, I would say that I would rather start adding in boost. Timing, personally, I like more timing with less boost for my car. But the thing is I'm not running any extra timing because you really don't start to see any huge gains on 93 octane. So realistically, the question's got to be hinged around the fuel type. If it's 93 octane, then I'm going to say I want to see more boost and less timing because you'll just get more power out of it a little bit more safely. You're not going to be really freaking out knock sensors at that point. If you're putting together kind of a safe tune to pick up, small gains like 50 or 60 horsepower. For stock boost, you can play with timing a little bit, but you got to really hose the thing down with fuel at that point. And that can hurt 60 foot and in transition throttle response. So, in that respect, I like to err a little bit on the side of stock. But for E85, all bets are off, right? I'd say throw the kitchen sink at it. Quee's saying, thanks. I was probably going to go with the RT, but fully loaded and do slight work on it. The exhaust, unless it comes with active exhaust and intake for sure. Yeah, go with the active exhaust on that. Lone with Custom saying, do you think I would be better off using a Holley EFI throttle body unit instead of a carburetor? It depends on what you want to do with it. If you're up in the north where starting can be an issue, that might come into play. But the EFI stuff is good, but it's really hard to beat a well-tuned carburetor. So, if you're talking about going with like one of the Edelbrock carburetors that's more or less like a Rochester already, you're not really going to notice much of a difference. Low speed, mid-range, all of that is going to be fairly well the same. The fuel injection, you will get better throttle response in general, but it's real subjective at that point. It's not like a night and day difference, so to speak, at least in terms of expense. So the big deal, though, is fuel economy and low maintenance. The Holley setup is, it's zero maintenance and it's fairly easy to put together. It's just tedious, but it's not hard. I don't know, man. What does your budget dictate? If you've got the money, if Holley EFI is in the conversation, you kind of go with the Holley EFI, right? That's just the way you go. Just understand that it is going to be a more involved installation process. So it's a lot easier just to run, a fuel line to fuel, to your fuel pump, from fuel pump to a regulator to the carburetor, and a return line back to the tank. That's your fuel system with a carburetor, and it works pretty good. But carburetors do have some issues that are inherent to carburetors. Vapor lock and things like that can potentially be an issue. So again, if your budget allows for it, go with the Holley. Shawnee is asking, why is my stock Hellcat louder than my stock Scat Pack? Not dramatic, but a little bit different. All has to do with the mufflers. The stock Scat Pack had a normal oval MagnaFlow basically style muffler with you can see through it, but and the Hellcat's got a small glass pack type of a resonator. Doesn't have a true muffler. Let's see. Oh, Dr. Div's hanging out with Ashley. Let's see. Shawnee's asking, are my rear half shafts at the limit with a 148 60 foot? Weak point, you are in the same boat. Yes, I am, and I don't plan on changing them anytime real soon. I don't see them being too much of an issue right now. I would say that the limit of your half shafts, let me speak to you like this. You are closer to hitting your limit than I am, only because of density, altitude, and the fact that you're running a lower pulley. You're making a bit more torque down low, which is going to certainly help to strain those half shafts. But I wouldn't really put it on the top of your list as far as things to worry about. I've known guys that have run with stock half shafts for a very long time with much higher power levels that I will ever see, and higher than where you are right now, that didn't have any real issues. So if that does you any good, G-Force makes an unbelievably good set of axles, though. They are pricey, but they've got a lifetime warranty, and I don't know of anybody ever that's broken one. Let's see. Oh, Rips is saying, Shawnee, I always heard the 392s were louder because they were bigger motors and had more compression. Nope, has to do with the exhaust system. Let's see. Oh, Dr. Diff's chiming in on Lone Wolf there. Saying it'll make more power, it'll be much better. The make more power thing is not necessarily true, but it will certainly make more power under the curve, which means not at wide open throttle. You'll have an optimized fuel curve all the time. So in that respect, it will make more power. Again, though, it's all about that paper, son. If you don't have the money for it, it's not really worth even talking about. But if you have enough money to have this thing in the conversation, you need to be leaning in that direction. Let's see. Xcash is saying, hey, D Mason, you got to go check on an 09 Challenger 616 speed tomorrow and possibly take home with me. Good luck on that one, man. I like it. 09 Chally 6.1 with a 6-speed. That's a fun car, man. Little SRT car. Love those things, man. Saw a real pretty black one the other day. And I would not mind putting one of those together. I'm got such a soft spot in my heart for those cars. Let's see. Rick is saying, I also have a 6.1. He's talking to XCAT. 6-speed Challenger. I hate to admit it feels slow, but no, they're fun cars, man. Man, look, by today's standards, everything is slow, right? Everything just shy of the freaking, the freaking 747 is slow. Johnny's saying, Rip, my 16 Hellcat is louder than my 18 Scat Pack. It's a mystery to me. Yep, it's all about that exhaust. Guys, crawl up underneath there and take a look at it for yourself. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Catalyst is saying, if you're going to buy a non-Mopar for under $50,000, what would you buy? Depends on what I was going to use it for. If it were a truck, I would get a Ford. If it were a SUV, depending on the type of SUV, if it were a crossover, I'd get a Hyundai. If it were a car, I would get a Supra. If it were a used car, that just opens up everything. But if it's a classic car, I would get a 69 Roadrunner. If it were, let's see, am I missing a category here? I think I pretty much covered all of them, but that's what I would do. And I would take that Supra and I would tune the piss out of it, boost it to the freaking moon, throw nitrous on it, and call it a day. I would make the nastiest ass Supra I could possibly make. Let's see. Ashley's saying I ran a 148 exactly 60 foot last night. That's awesome. We're all running some good 60 foots right now. Toxic Hellcat saying, what are your thoughts on rip and tune incognito lower pulley, no tune required? No, it depends on where you are. Okay, if you are up north and you are living at 2,000 foot DA or 2,000 foot elevation, even at 1,500 foot elevation, it's probably not going to hurt anything. I say probably. I'm not going to hang my hat on anything when it comes to adding boost without a tune. But that's just something that. It's a risk that I personally wouldn't take. I would never throw boost at a car and not do something with the tune. The thing is this. Let me give you an example. Little girl sitting right behind you. At the track rental, did go into cat overtemp. Keep in mind, I am still running catalytic converters on my car, and as such, I am still running cat converter overtemp protection. Although it is a little bit massaged, I am still protecting the cat. When I go into cat overtemp protection, my injector duty cycle goes to 91.5%. Averages about 86 to 87% before I go into cat overtemp. If you throw a different pulley on that car, without the provision of doing something about cat overtemp, it is going to pin the injectors. In other words, it's going to max out your injectors, especially in cold weather. When you max out injectors, potential for very bad things goes, well, basically, it doesn't go through the roof. I mean, you are living in the potential of very bad things happening at that point. So I would say don't do anything without a tune. And if you're going to throw more power at it, do yourself a favor and look into throwing a different set of injectors on it too. Just consider that part of the cost of admission. It doesn't always mean the car needs it, but if you're running close enough to max out a set of injectors, you're running close enough to hurting the engine. Again, your risk to reward ratio starts to really, really look bad at that point. Let's see. Dr. Div saying, if you don't run sevens, you're slow like me. Man, that's the truth today, man. That's the world we live in, though, right? And, that's just kind of how it is. In a world of, shitbox, mid 9-second cars, that's life nowadays, man. What do you want to say? DSRT saying, ran a low 10.9 stock on 18s on the rear. Now I'm tuned on 285, making 750 wheel. What kind of time is typical for that setup so I can know what to shoot for? 990s is what you should be looking at on a 285 upper in really good air. 10.0s if you're new to that combination and you're just learning how to get the thing down the track in good air. But beyond the, you in super low DAs, 990s wouldn't be out of the equation, but it'd be high nines typically. Again, 10.0s would be right there where you would be basically hinging on a 9-second pass at that point. And you're on 17s, then that'll certainly help a little bit. But yeah, still same idea. 10.0s, 990s running there. Xcash is saying, not really out for speed, just looking for a torquey motor with a manual and the 392 a little out of my price range. I'm telling you, man, you're gonna have a riot with that car. I love that car. Riff is saying, what can I do to my ProCharge 616 speed to make it have more torque down low? That's a tough one, man. What can you do? Well, throw more pulley at it for one. If you can get away with it, that'll certainly help. But there's just really not a lot. Long tubes, if you don't already have them, will help it, especially on partial throttle. But that's going to be about the extent of, that's going to be about the extent of what you can get away with on that thing, trying to get more out of it. Dr. Div saying the no tune thing comes back again. Well, Doctor, look, we're going to be running into this for a long time. And the reality is that they keep marketing it and people don't know the difference. They're believing the marketing because why shouldn't they? There's no reason for them not to. And I'm sorry, but to me, it's lying. And unless they're willing to cut a check, if your engine blows, give you a Hellcat to drive while your Hellcat that they blew up with their part is in the emergency room getting put back together again. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna buy into it. And like you've already seen that they pissed off knock sensors already with this no tune to begin with. Haven't even gotten into that part of it. I was only talking about the fueling side. There's just too much to there's too much to go wrong to even entertain the idea of doing something like that with no tune. So, especially down here, that might play up north, and that's fine. But we're not up north, and when we're talking about that down here, we just see too many failures too often. So that's something to consider. Ken saying, my stock tune red eye will go 9s all day with 317 pulley, drag pack, catless mids. Both stock front seats, 139 60 foot. I went 1046 with 20-inch radials only when brand new. Yeah, no, I mean, we had multiple Mopars went 1037 with his on the 20-inch drag radial. So, yeah, I mean, with a pulley, it should go nines. I mean, shouldn't it? It's a red eye. It's a pulleyed red eye. If it doesn't go nines, you've done something wrong. So, I mean, they're all about the same. That's the thing. This thing with basically the same mods as a red eye is sitting on a 1020 with stock boost. So yeah, if I bump this thing up to the equivalent of a red eye with a 317, it'd be about a 980, 990 car. It's what it should be. So, good on you for running nines with a pulleyed car. I would expect it to. And if it doesn't, then I would expect that you had some problems with it, either a tune or mechanically. But it was stock boost. No, I mean, I haven't seen one do it, and I hope that they get there soon, though. A lot of guys gunning after red eyes right now for some reason. Philip's saying, hey, B, plan on installing BMR lower control arms, Nitto Tri-5Rs, and a diff brace this spring for my wide body Hellcat. Having a hard time launching and wheel hop. Also, rear seat delete. Have installed the 309. Check your tire pressure. More than likely, your tire pressure is too low. If you're running the Tri-5s on that thing, run them at about 30 PSI. If not, your contact patch is not going to be flat, and that can cause it to wheel hop a little bit. The bare minimum, 27 PSI. And if you're running, that's for drag radials or street tires. Samuel's asking, can you hurt a stock Hellcat with 91 octane gas from California? No, not if you leave it stock and your knock sensors are working properly. No, you're not going to hurt it. There's enough wiggle room in the tune and enough sensitivity in the knock sensors to pull all of that back. Quite honestly, that's the reason why the knock sensors are so sensitive with these Mopars, is to yank timing when they see 91 octane. Or at least see the effects of 91 octane, I should say, as they are, if they start to see it knock, they want to yank the timing is what I'm getting at. So no, you're not going to hurt it as long as those parameters are met. You'll be good. Let's see, Dr. News, another thing that the knock sensors, hat. Oh, and those cats. English, brother, trying to figure out what you're saying. Shawnee's saying, good night. Good night, Shawnee. Lone Wolf Customs, I'm afraid with modern cars as fast as they are and as much computerized as they're going to, eventually we're going to have fast as hell cars we don't get to drive. Yeah, no kidding. Riff saying, I hope not, Sam. Yeah, me and you both. And yeah, he's saying he's been driving his in California for a while and everything seems good there. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to run into any problems per se. It's just that you would notice on a data log, instead of 2 to 3 degrees of timing, probably 4 to 5 degrees of timing knock being pulled out of it due to knock retard. Let's see. Xcash hanging out with Riff. Let's see. Catalyst is asking, how did the quarter mile become the standard for measuring car performance versus, say, a half mile or a mile race? That goes way, way, way back in history to horse racing. And I won't give you the full history on it, but basically quarter horse racing is what was very popular at the time. And quarter horses sprint 1/4 of a mile. And so they would put a car up against a quarter horse to see which one was fastest in the quarter mile. Then once cars became faster than horses, they would then put 2 cars up against each other and run them in the quarter mile. And that's where drag racing came from. It's kind of a cool history there. Now, 1/8 mile racing has a completely different history. 1/8 mile, which is 660 feet, is roughly the length of one block, one city block. So if you go to Chicago, anywhere in New York, Dallas, Houston, places like that, a block is about 1/8 of a mile. And that's when you're going stoplight to stoplight. You'd be racing from one street to the next, which is roughly 1/8 of a mile. So that's where those come from. DSRT saying, thanks, bro. Got the arm flex. I like it. Lone Wolf Customs, go fast, but the car will be driving it like a roller coaster. Yeah, no kidding. Hope they have a lot of barf bags in those. Oh, Dr. Div saying it's raining there now. Yeah, I'm going to have to give little Miss Nasty over here a sponge bath. It's kind of gross. Getting gross down here. Sunset Beach saying nice. Rob saying, is it possible for me to make my 5.7 just as fast or faster than a Scat? Thanks in advance. Absolutely it is. Cam, nitrous, all kinds of fun things can get that thing faster than a 392. It doesn't take that much to be able to run with one, but you know, you've got to be pretty dedicated to that task. Let's see. HU's hanging out with Rift. Let's see. Toxic Hellcat saying, have you ever dynoed your Chally? And if so, how much power? Donald Powers checking in saying, hello, Mr. Mason. Hello, Donald Powers. I did dyno it. And on a questionable Mustang dyno, it made 666 horsepower. I never did post that because I didn't feel like that was an accurate number for the mods that the car has and the state of tune that it's in. But it was still pretty cool that it did put down 666 horsepower. So there's that. Let's see. Oh, Doc Diff, I think, is answering somebody's question about his crew cab. Running 11.1 at 123. Yes, it did. Don Power saying, no, not 666. It did. In fact, it green screened at 666.0. It charted... because chart will be a little bit different than green screen because of smoothing. I think it charted 664. But yeah, if you go into smoothing, kill all the smoothing, which will replicate the green screen max number, it was 666. And I need to do that. I need to get that. I need to print that dyno chart out and just have it in my office. But yeah, it did it. Rip saying my stock Hellcat made 665 to the wheels, but I like to say 666 because it sounds cool. Yeah, mine actually nailed the number. That was fun. It is a Hellcat. Yeah, it is. Don Power saying 666 for a Demon. So that, oddly enough, the Demons and the Red Eyes 93 don't make much difference between the Demon with the crate PCM. It's supposed to make 840. I think they split the difference. Honestly, it's 650 horsepower ish. If you're lucky, like real lucky on that Mustang dyno out of a Demon or a Red Eye 93 octane mode. It's just kind of how it is. So Dr. saying, I just need a dyno sheet on 18 PSI to hang up. Yeah, well, we need to get your truck making some boost, bro. But yeah, you'll be in good shape. I mean, the truck's got enough in it right now. I think it'd be safe to run pretty good into the 10s. You know, I would say probably, you know, the way it sits now at about 18 PSI, you should run about a 1080-ish, maybe 1060. Might need to take a look at rear tires at that point. But yeah, it'll be close to that. Definitely in the 10s though. Let's see. Hector's asking, what do you think of the new Ram TRX? Is it going to be a Raptor killer or no? It will be a Raptor killer in this respect. It'll have a V8 and it'll have a sound that's at least respectable. You know, they have every opportunity, Dodge does with the TRX, to build something that's really kick-ass. I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch as that thing progresses. But as far as being a true Raptor killer, it's going to be tough, man. If you've never driven one of the new Raptors, the interiors of those trucks is amazing. Just the drive of those trucks is really nice. So it's going to be tough in that respect. Although I will say this about the TRX. It will have a more fun feel than the Raptor does. Any of the 10-speed turbo trucks, whether it's the 2.7, the 3.5, they have a very diesel-ish quality to them. And it's not a bad driving experience, but it's not 8-speed Hemi fun driving experience. Again, it's this kind of a soft, I put it like this. That truck could be a full second quicker in the quarter mile than the Dodge or anything else with like an 8-speed automatic V8 powered. It could be a full second quicker and you would swear to God it was slower. When I drove, in fact, I test drove one, and I wanted to fall in love with this truck because the interior was so nice. But with that V6 and the turbo, you'd get this waft of torque and then it would shift, and then a waft of torque and then it would shift, but it was never really pinning you back. Where the V8 would just in the Hemi would just, it felt fun. It would shift. It would give that solid shift feel to it. Just made it a lot more fun to drive. So from that point of view, from a subjective point of view, it's probably going to be better. But numbers wise, obviously the power is going to be there to beat it. But, you know, just driving the thing, that'll be left to be seen. And hopefully the thing doesn't cost $100,000 because, you know, Mopar. Let's see. Riff saying, why do you think the red eye only comes in automatic? The red eye only comes in automatic because the 6-speed probably can't handle the torque and the weight load. Dr. Diffs, 2 more runs and I could have done that 1099 on 12 PSI. I would agree with that 100%. I'd like to see it go 60s at 14. Realistically, you know, we need to get that thing in the 60s, high 60s at 14, and then from there just turn the wick up and go from there. Toxic Hellcat's asking, do you think the Charger Red Eye is on the way? I don't know. That's a real good question, and I don't know. I think a Charger Red Eye is an answer to a question that nobody has. They've already kind of done about as good as they can with the Hellcat version of it, but now that they've got the wide body, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't go with a Red Eye version. Personally, I would love to see it for no other reason than that's just more Red Eye blocks that are going to be floating around out there. So yeah, I think it's a great idea on their part, but I'm not really, I think here's the thing. Okay. I think that the brand is a little too watered down. How weird is that to even say, right? We're talking about a brand that is everything that Dodge seems to make or will make will have a 700 horsepower variant to it. That's great. Don't get me wrong. But in a world of 700 horsepower, 750 or 800 isn't that big of a step up. I mean, it's a step up, but it's not really a step up, okay? And so because of that, I find it a little bit difficult to get overly enamored with the idea of a Red Eye variant when the platform itself needs an update more than just throwing more power at it. That we've actually, but I never thought I would say this, but I think that we finally come to a point here where, man, look, throwing more power at the thing is just not going to satisfy the requirements from most enthusiasts that are wanting to trade their car in on a new Mopar. You're asking somebody to trade their car in on a car that is basically their car. And if they already own a Hellcat, there's nowhere else to go. There's no up to look up to. And especially when you start to look at the dollars and cents behind this thing. And the fact that a Red Eye is considerably more expensive than a Hellcat, I don't know. It makes the value proposition look pretty bad. And to be honest with you guys, I don't even understand why the Hellcat still exists. It's a bad look on the Red Eye. Let me tell you what I mean by that. A stock Hellcat with a 309 gear and a rear seat delete and a drag pack, something like what you might see right behind yours truly over here, is right on top of a Red Eye with a 309 gear and a drag pack. In other words, the performance difference, option for option, is non-existent, at least not in real world terms. You're talking a 1018 versus, and this is a stock boost Hellcat, mind you. Car doesn't have pulleys. It doesn't have a tune. Aside from me throwing a little bit more fuel at it just to be a little bit safer, but it's got more or less the same shift points as a red eye. And it's right there on top of a freaking red eye. So, but anyway, why does the Hellcat even exist in that world where the red eye could have just been the next successor and everything makes 800 horsepower, give or take? And no one's the worse for wear here. But I guess that's kind of my point. The Hellcat already does very well on its own. It's easy to see why it's not optioned the way that a red eye would be, because it makes it difficult to, I don't know. It makes it kind of difficult to shell out the extra 20 grand or whatever for a red eye when one of these will do everything that a red eye will do. Just curious though, what they're going to do next. And that's the big thing. So as far as I'm concerned, a red eye version of the Charger isn't, I mean, if you have to have one and that's what you're just about, yeah, okay, I'll be excited for you. And we'll both row that same boat together, but I need to see something a little bit more coming out of FCA. I need to see something new, either a new Halo car, a la, a Viper with a red eye engine. That would be tits. Something along the lines of maybe a revised platform for the LX platform, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. A revised version of the LX platform. Maybe bring the weight down just a little bit. Something like that, but there's going to have to be some kind of target to hit from that perspective for me to really get worked up over it, because without that, man, it just doesn't, it's just really not resonating with me. Hang on, I'll tell you, I'm going to go on the other side of the car. I got to get a water, man. I got to get this going on. Just hang on a second. Talk amongst yourselves. Hang on a second. You go to my cooler over here. Go crawl over here. Get me an agua. Ah, man. Y'all are catching me right out of the gym. Water. The stuff that fish piss in. Anyway, but I think you get the idea. I think you kind of understand where I'm coming with that. What the shit is that? All right. Hector's in. Let's see. McDavid. Yeah, anything you can do to the old 5.9 Magnum motors for power? Say just inherited a 96. Yeah, I mean, same principles apply. Heads, cam. I think the 5.9 was a TBI truck, if I'm not mistaken. Stuff like that, tuning. But not a ton. If the truck's been well maintained, a set of tubes and a tune will get you about as far as you really need to go with that thing. Just keep it maintained. It'll be a fun truck. Torquey little thing. Let's see. Xcash TR6060 6-speed manual only, rated to 700 foot-pounds of torque, and a 4,000-pound car is pushing it. Yeah, it's really pushing it, especially when you consider the fact that, these cars aren't just 4,000 pounds. That red eye is going to tip the scale at about 42 and a half. And that's if you're lucky. Just saying. They're heavy. Dr. Div saying 60 at 14 it will be, and then we will see what it actually will do. Absolutely. That's what my crystal ball has that truck running. Ripped is asking, how hard is it to get a red eye motor to put in my Hellcat if I ever need one? Not very hard at all. As a matter of fact, if you've got the money, Dodge will have one for you. I would think that would be pretty easy, a little bit easier now than what it was. That's not to say you can't build kind of a build your own type of a program. If you ever were going to do a refresh, for example, you can just get molder pistons and rods and do the normal just stock displacement replacement type deal. sneak a little bit of extra compression in there too while you're at it. But if you have a window block, your next best bet would be to get a Hellcat block and a Hellcat crank, and then go Molnar pistons and rods and go about it that way. If you really want to be sneaky, just paint the thing red. Then you got a red eye. That's all there is to it. The only difference would be camshaft at that point, but you could go with a Hellcat or a red eye cam and be just fine. I think the red eye and the Demon have a little bit more exhaust duration, but that's to handle the little bit more boost that they've got. Red eye cam is just fine. Or Hellcat cam, rather, is just fine. I was saying like if he blows his motor. Yep. Dr. Diff saying, well, it's coming to Texas 2K. I like it. Scott B saying, what's up, B Mason? Got all the thumbs up. I love it. The Wolf was saying the red eyes and Trackhawks just sit. Might be talking about it at dealerships. Cal is saying, when you go to the drag strip, do you have your car inspected, or they just go by the honor system? They know me well enough to where they don't really bother with it. But if they don't know you, then they're definitely going to sniff around your car. So just know that coming into this. But mine, they just look at the tech card and write whatever number's on the tech card on my car. Not a whole lot of changing going on there. Let's see. Rift saying, the only reason I want a red eye is because the motor is a lot more robust, but that only matters if I'm going to mod it a lot. Actually, it matters in another way. Where the advantage comes in with the red eye, it's not just with the engine. It's got a better fuel system as well. Now, the injectors are still junk. The injectors that come on these cars, at least from I'm not going to say a modability, but from a consistency standpoint, are not that great. But, it is what it is. But the main thing is that they're not Bosch injectors or Siemens injectors or non-rebuildable units. There's that. But it does have a better fuel system, and the internals technically are better. So there's at least that to consider. If you ever wanted to go E85, it's a lot easier to do that with a red eye than it is with a Hellcat. It's just a better setup all the way around. It's got better axles. The cool down mode is kind of a thing, I guess. But all in all, it is a better setup than the Hellcat. I mean, you're not just buying the engine with that extra money. You're buying the fuel system, and you're buying all the rest of the stuff. Basically, it's kind of like you're buying a Hellcat and buying the fuel system and everything else to go along with modifications, potential later on modifications that's coming with the red eye. If I were to buy a car to modify, it would probably be a red eye, because I would have everything kind of already ready to go. And then from there, I could add, whatever level of, hot rod parts I'd want to it, and already have the parts there. I mean, it's ready to go, more or less. Let's see. The doctor said it should have got beer. Yeah, I know. Trying to keep that girlish figure. Hector's saying, I'm almost going to pay off my Scat Pack, so it's about time for me to get a Hellcat powered insert, preferably TRX. TRX would be a lot of fun, man. Don Power saying the 96 Ram won one lap America 2 sport challenges, and my 96 with an RV cam, homebrew head, stock converter, shorties, 392 gears, best 1442, 99 miles an hour, won the Mopar truck meet back to back. They're a lot of fun, man. I kind of miss the simplicity of those engines too. I've known guys with those traces, no kidding. I've known guys with those trucks. I'm trying to think of the number of them now. About 4? If it's not 4, it's 5 that were 400,000 mile trucks. So they definitely have that going for them. Callis is asking, do you think they should bring back the push button automatic? Man, I hate to break this to you, bro, but you kind of have one already. that gear lever is nothing more than you're just pressing buttons in there already. The dial is nothing more than just selecting more or less a button in the trucks. So in that matter of looking at it, it'd be kind of cool if they had it just for nostalgia, but you kind of already have it now. So, excuse me. Let's see. But at any rate, well, guys, we are coming up on almost an hour and 45 minutes. I'm going to bounce here. Hope everybody's having themselves a fantastic weekend. It's going to be raining, so my weekend's a little bit out of whack. But, you know, what can I say? I don't have anything really to complain about. I'll just be doing laundry. Yay. Got a couple more questions before I check out. James is asking, do they offer the Hellcat with the 309 gear? No, they do not. If not, why don't they? Scared. If they offered the Hellcat with the 309 gear, they'd never sell another Red Eye. Donald Power saying, my 60 Dodge Matador had the push button. Those are actually really cool. And Doc just saying, good show. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Hopefully I answered some of your questions about density altitude in the process. Y'all have a great one, and I will catch up with you on the next one. That's a wrap. Adios.